This is Kimberly Rice, and you are tuned into the Secret Sauce Marketing Tasting Show, the groundbreaking podcast for business bosses, professional women, and anyone who is hungry to learn how to create the career, business, and life of their dreams by charting their own course. Let me first welcome you to the Secret Sauce Marketing Tastings podcast. We're just delighted that you're carving out some time this afternoon on a Friday afternoon to join us and talk about all kind of fun things in connection with social media.
Cool. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. So, Spencer, why don't you share with us a little bit with our listeners about yourself and what your professional passion is?
My professional passion is making difficult stuff more easily understood by those who I'm targeting as my audience. And whether that was back in the early days of college when I started working at IBM, and that was right before the Y2K era, if you recall that.
I
It
do.
was, yeah, it was our job to take really difficult at the time, what they called IT or MIS or whatever version of that you wanted to use back then, and make it easy to understand for our customers. And then ended up doing that as an entrepreneur as well, and sold that IT company, and then ended up in financial services in a pretty complex area there as well. And that was in 401k, which has a lot to do with legal and tax implications, and did that job for 7 years. And along that period of time of doing basically being a salesperson in the 401k field, I saw this whole social media thing coming, and I go, wow, this is a really cool way to, as an adjunct to our normal business development efforts, further what it is that we could do and sell more stuff. And I wasn't allowed to use it back at the time when I had my securities licensing. So I got rid of that January 2015, and then just aspired to learn social media best I could and share what I've proven myself with other people. And that's where we are today.
So that's fantastic, and it has been quite the frontier, hasn't it?
It has. I think, Kimberly, we're still very early as to the impact that this has had. And maybe the best example I can give is back in the day when I used to collect baseball cards as a kid, my best case scenario for ever virtually meeting a ball player was to take one of his baseball cards, mail it to his club for which he played, with hopes that he signs it and send it back. And
Wow.
there was maybe a 50-50 chance of that happening, and just getting that back in any capacity was that touch, if you will, with that person.
Mhm.
But now, because everybody's on social media, especially if they're of any consequence in culture or business or politics or whatever, you can reach people these days. So we don't have those constraints anymore. And I think we're still, like I said, very early into realizing the fact that no one is off limits if we aspire to reach that person.
It is crazy how much direct access we have, that we never thought that we might have. Similar to you, I was crazy about Donny Osmond
Mm.
as a girl.
Hmm.
And, these are the days when you actually paid for long distance phone calls. And I called California, I believe. I lived in North Carolina at the time for many years, and I called to request a life-size poster of Donny Osmond. And I got duly um, punished from my mother when she saw that long-distance phone call along on our phone bill. I mean, it's like that seems so crazy nowadays, but the whipping was worth it.
Yeah, yeah. So did you get the poster?
I did.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Okay, cool, cool. You left me hanging there for a little bit.
But it's just crazy. I mean, back in, not even that long ago. I mean,
Yeah.
like, when did you jump on? What was your first social media account?
It was Twitter, but I used it only in a listening capacity so I could pay attention to certain people because, like I said, back then in the securities industry and financial services, they were very strict, not quite as strict as, I'm sorry, they were more strict now, or then, excuse me, then as opposed to now, but it allowed me to at least listen and pay attention and try to figure out what people were doing to pay attention to other people. And January 2015, that's really when I started creating my social media accounts and getting serious about it.
Got it.
Yeah.
I felt like I was a late adapter when I started my LinkedIn account in 2008.
Hmm.
And I had never even heard of it. And the one of my management colleagues at a law firm I was chief marketing officer of said, "Well, you got to get on LinkedIn." I'm like, "What is LinkedIn?"
Hmm.
And the only reason I hopped on Facebook was because I'm somewhat transplanted from family, blood family, and I just wanted to like high school friends and blood family living in New Jersey. There's nobody up here, and so everybody's in the South or other places in the country, and so I just wanted to kind of keep in touch. But having, I think it was probably between 99 and 04, 03, when we started getting serious inside law firms. We were getting into seriously web development, and then maybe 05, jumping on, well, I'd have to take that back, not 05, maybe it was more 08, 09, where firms were looking at and thinking about what is this social media, and does it even have a place in the workplace? So that was very, it was like that. And I would imagine, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, in my world of professional services, everybody's skeptical, cynical. What in the world do we do with this? Why do we need to be on it? If I have a job, I don't need to, why am I on LinkedIn? It's just a resume. I'm sure you've heard these things, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, every possible misconception or predisposition you can think of when it comes to, how people feel about it. Yeah. And I think, Kimberly, what's really interesting, I was thinking about this from an adoption standpoint, again, like you had alluded to. If you are made aware of something new these days, right, in 2018, I would almost say unequivocally it would come from word of mouth. People saying, like someone had said to you, the LinkedIn thing, have you tried this out?
Mhm.
Because we're not accepting cold calls. We're certainly not accepting spam emails.
No.
And aside from that, the thing that I keep hearing, and I don't care who we're talking to, we could talk to a managing partner of a law firm, we could talk to just someone who's stayed at home and raised his kids, for the past 20 years. The way that they're learning about new things is via social media,
Yes.
but it's not because they're seeking them out. It's not they're going to Google or going to YouTube and searching for something. It goes, yeah, this thing popped up in my Facebook feed, and suddenly I bought this battery charging device that I never knew I wanted before. And it's that way of getting in front of people. And I feel like for those in professional services, it is I feel like it used to be your de facto resume. It probably is now, in fact, your resume, because resumes as a whole don't exist. And if people aren't at least availing themselves of the opportunity to put out there what it is that they're learning or something that they know or charitable stuff that they care about, you don't exist, right? So that's just where I want to get people off that idea of if it's a waste of time, or it's simply just the best way that there's ever been to reach massive amounts of people very quickly.
Abs- Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And in our world of digital marketing, I just gave a presentation a couple weeks ago for New Jersey State Bar, and I had a co-panelist who's she's director of social media for a local marketing communication firm, and she said about Facebook that if you you can, even as an individual or a company, you can load, post, any kind of content, but Facebook is really cracking down on whether you will even reach your target if you don't include at least some of your reach into paid advertising. I think
Yes, and
everybody was shocked to hear that.
yeah, and it's so funny. Have you ever heard about how the Yellow Pages originated?
I don't think I have.
Okay, that this might be a really good thing. I think your audience will enjoy, because it's a complete metaphor for what it is that she had mentioned. So just indulge me if you would. It's a brief
Sure.
story. Back in the early days of AT&T Ma Bell, right, where they controlled everything, you couldn't even get a phone unless you went to AT&T, if you remember that at
Yeah.
all, right?
Yep.
Okay, so they had this white book, right, with all the people listed in it, and they said, well, we should probably offset this with some kind of advertising, because the white book was so people wouldn't have to call the operator anymore. They could just dial up who they wanted directly. And they said we should probably have this yellow part too, where we put in local businesses. And I'm sure these businesses would be happy to pay for the right to be in this
Mhm.
book, because everybody's going to have this book. It'd be the way to look at them up.
Right.
And the AT&T salespeople would go into, let's say, the local pizza place, and the pizza owner would come out, covered in dough, and say, "What is it?" And the AT&T person would go, "Hey, we have this, adjunct to the white pages. It might be, depending on the size of your municipality, it might be a new book, it might be part of the existing book, but we're going to to have advertisements in there. We'd love to put your company in there. We'd love to put your pizza place in there. And the pizza place owner says, nah, no, I think we're okay right now. And AT&T had that same experience over and over. People didn't want to pay to advertise in this book.
Mhm.
So they took a different tack. AT&T later goes in, the same pizza place owner, guy comes out covered in dough again, and the AT&T person says, hey, I have good news for you. I'm not going to ask you to buy an ad. We're just going to take that existing phone that you have on the wall and hang another one right next to it. And the pizza place owner says, well, what's the catch? No catch, free phone, and it's going to be great. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Inevitably, so AT&T takes this yellow book, puts all of those new phone numbers in the different places of businesses, in the different places of business that they install this phone, and that gets distributed to everybody. And inevitably, this pizza place owner starts seeing that new phone ring because that's the phone number everybody has in their home.
Wow.
A year later, AT&T salesperson goes in, says, yeah, I have really bad news. I don't know how to tell you this, but that phone that we gave you before that we subsidized, we can't afford to have it in here anymore. And the pizza place owner goes, whoa, that's the only phone that rings. Oh, okay. How big of an ad would you like? And that's exactly what Facebook did. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, almost to a T, 18 months ago or so, he said, our users are telling us we don't want business advertisements to show up anymore. So if you want to reach people, you're going to have to pay us. And I'm sorry, but this is going to result in about a 90% decrease in organic or free reach. And it's the same exact model as what AT&T did.
Wow. That is mind blowing. And one of the things that is just, it's so interesting to try to educate our clients, professional services firms to get that. Because when we are retained for digital marketing programs, etc., and we try to explain the process and that not all social media channels are the same and all these different nuances, one response that we invariably receive is, well, I can't believe anybody's going to call me or hire me because they see me on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I have a website. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
they're so, I mean, God bless them, they're so ignorant, and we try to educate them. Um, and this is more times than not in the fact that, especially I would have to say in the legal services world where everything, like the lawyers like everything to be linear. It's not hardly ever linear as far as the business development or the business generation process. And we may say, well, no, you may not have a new client, lead or lead directly that's going to pick up the phone. You might, if there are certainly steps that we can take, and that's our whole purpose. But it's one of numerous marketing tactics to help you build your business. And it's becoming more and more of a sizable piece of what we call an integrated marketing action plan to reach, because Facebook, I know, and there's others, can be unbelievably targeted. And so, we'll have to remember that AT&T example, because that is just mind blowing.
It,
Thank you for sharing that. So onward, I was looking at some of your online digital assets. Extremely impressive. I applaud you. I can relate to the work that goes into all of those assets and how you maintain and connect them all. So hats off to you, brother.
oh, thank you. That really means a lot coming from a pro like you. Thank you.
So social media for business development. I know this is something you're passionate about. I'm passionate about it. So would you please share your journey and the learning that led you to publish your book and what it delivers for your readers?
Yeah, the core of it comes from the idea of what I call ROTOMA, which is the return on top of mind awareness. Because we oftentimes in anything digital or social or certainly in sales, people talk about ROI, right? What's my return on investment? And
Sure.
this is a different idea that I propose, which is return on top of mind awareness. And if we could just go back to something that you had talked about, which is attribution modeling, right? If we look at in a non-digital or non-social media world, if someone were to look at a new client generation process, that individual, that attorney typically will never really quite know which touch it was that convinced somebody to hire you, whether it's a handshake or an in-person meeting or a networking event or a phone call or a handwritten note or an email, but you know you have to keep showing up, right? And
Mhm.
so oftentimes people say, well, this social media thing, I don't think it's going to be that secret sauce like you had alluded to. People aren't going to call me because of LinkedIn, but I would propose people are not going to call you because of any one particular activity unless you get on stage and you give a mind-blowing speech and they're exactly there ready to buy at the right time. They go, oh, you're who I need.
Right.
Like you need to make it part of the process, right? So what I propose to people, and this is the entire thrust of the book, is it requires such a nominal investment of time to reach hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in a systematic fashion, simply by putting things out on social media that are meant to educate, that are meant to be objective, that are meant to help other people and make that part of your business development process. And not a way to supplant anything else. It's just in those normal business hours where you get to work and you have 6 minutes to do something, get on LinkedIn, post something informative, interesting, educational, make somebody else look good, etc., and then just move on with the rest of your day, knowing that you've in fact at least done something. And that's the book in a microcosm of it.
Oh, that is so on target. Our version of that is our strategic marketing wheel, that I bring out constantly, excuse me, in presentations or with new clients, is that there's no one marketing tactic that's going to give you the slam, what do you call it, the home run or the slam, what do you call it, grand slam.
There you
I'm not a big sports person, but there's no one marketing. I knew it was grand. I was slam something. There's no one marketing tactic, or like you said, there's no one thing that's going to give you that grand slam that opens the flood of clients, retaining anybody in any business, but rather it's, what I call the massive amounts of action, the speaking and the publishing and the social media and the PR and the, having a professionally designed website, all of those um, activities, um, integrated into or incorporated into an integrated marketing program. But as I say to clients all the time and audiences that I present to, building a business, as challenging as it can be, has never been easier than it is today because of all this technology.
go. I agree 100% with what you said.
So in your book, you address gaining top of mind awareness with clients to maximize ROI. Um, can you elaborate a little bit about the steps that you feel like are critical to get and stay top of mind with targeted audiences online?
I think that there's really a twofold approach. And I'd like to focus on LinkedIn because I feel that's the most intimate from a business setting, right? And people oftentimes, because people are on other platforms for other reasons, it's really hard for them to oftentimes disassociate using Facebook or using Twitter for business. So let's just look at LinkedIn in a vacuum, because that's oftentimes why people exist on LinkedIn as a whole. Now, the first thing I'd propose is that if you're not connected with somebody, if you haven't actually reached out and connected to them on LinkedIn, you're a ghost. And unless something happens where you share something or a friend shares something and somehow you get on that person's radar, they're never going to see your stuff, because the computers are kind of dumb. Like the computers and the algorithms are intelligent, but they only really know what we've told them. So they can't infer who you know unless you really legitimately are connected to those people, because it has to be that bilateral commitment, right? You send out the connection request, somebody acknowledges that and says, yes, I will connect with this person. So it's going through and systematically connecting with those whom you'd like to reach. Now, that's oftentimes people do one of two approaches. they either just spray and pray, meaning to just connect with everybody they possibly can,
Hmm.
or they just hit a button that says, well, I sent the connection request and this person's going to accept. And what I'd ask is, because you really just have one chance to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, to do at least a little bit of research and send a personalized connection request that's important, and giving that person a reason to accept that connection request, a la, hey, you know what, I really like what you do here locally, or I read an article about you, or I see you in the press and you're doing this great charitable work, and I'd like to follow you here more effectively on LinkedIn as well and see what you're up to in a professional setting, or something that gives them a reason to accept your connection. Because once that happens, then you're at least going to start showing up. And that's the second part, right? Is the content creation.
Hmm.
And what I err to, we talk about this in the book a lot, what I err to more than anything else is a lot of social media has turned into just a glamour show, right? Look at me, how important I am, taking this great shot, doing whatever, speaking somewhere, et cetera. I mean, that's fine. It's nice to laud yourself. But one of the things that people are wildly underusing when it comes to social media is understanding that you have a media broadcast platform, and you have the best opportunity there's ever been, ever, to highlight the accomplishments of other people. And when you do that, it's not just a nice thing to do, right? Like we all do that individually or through handwritten notes or whatever, and that's great. But to go a step further, and when you acknowledge somebody publicly, that person's going to see that and acknowledge that, and the inherent virality, if you will, of that post really starts to take off, because other people admire that. They admire the fact that you made their friend or their work colleague or whatever look good by way of you using your social media channel to point out their accomplishments. And I feel like, Kimberly, that's something that we will never, ever run out of content, with the ability to say, let's look for good news about other people and propagate that. So that would be my second portion, is systematically connect with those whom you want to reach, and then just be a PR mechanism for other
Other
people.
people. I think that's phenomenal. And you're right. I mean, after a while, it gets to be a little bit on the boring side when we see just post after post, of just self promotion without even really offering useful, and what I would say useful, educational, informative, something that's going to make your audience, your connections, life, work, something in their world a little bit easier that they didn't know before.
Well said. Yeah, you're right.
An
You're right.
example, I could give you an example, and I'd like to hear an example from you. But the other day, you posted about the use of video for emails,
Hmm.
and I had heard of this. There was another tool that I had been made aware of, but when you broke it down so simply in writing, and I believe you actually had a video. Didn't you link a video up on that post?
I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it just, I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, I've just got to do this. And, like, what am I mean, I've been thinking about it. I've been, reading about it. It's just, on my list of things to do, of the endless list of things to do. And it's like, this is so powerful, so providing content that as an example that this will, could make a difference in a lot of my frustration level of gaining people's attention for whatever, of just in writing and emails, and it's easy to delete an email or whatever, but just doing a little bit something to compel um, whatever the action is that you are looking for. So thank you for that again. But you really have what has gotten you to where you are now. I mean, you said you started in 2015. I can only imagine how many hours you've logged to perfect some of your approaches, and taking the steps that you are in the social media world.
I think it's really two things. And the first is something I learned from our rock band. So I was a naive, college guy. We started this band, and we started to play our own rock shows. So we'd go to a venue and say, could we play here? And they'd say, yeah, sure. All you got to do is get your gear all set up. You get usually a sound person, you get a light person. And then, oh, by the way, you probably want to get some people here to watch you. And that's really hard. Like I don't care like how talented you
Yeah.
are. Like it's really, really difficult to have people show up at an event. And so we reverse engineered this and said, well, ideally we would get on a stage that already needs somebody. And how do we do this? So we discovered that in my home state of Wisconsin, we have, and a lot of people don't know this, we have the world's largest music festival per the Guinness
Hmm.
Book. It's called Summerfest, and it's 700 bands, 11 days, 11 stages. It's crazy. It's awesome. And I cold called the Summerfest office, and I won't go into the long story, but the short story was I asked them, how do we play there? And the woman who answered the phone was gracious enough to go, well, here are the 7 or so steps. If you do this stuff, I'll put you on stage. And we did. And that was what I call a credibility milestone. So once you've played the world's largest music festival, you can pretty much go anywhere and say, we've been vetted by this thing.
Sure.
Why don't you trust us to be good? And that really just boils down to asking, right? Finding a need and then asking the question. And I don't know if you recall this, but this is the exact same thing we had done with Law Journal newsletters and marketing the law firm. I had reached out to you as the editor,
Yeah.
and I said, hey, I'd love to write a piece about this. And you go, okay, what do you have in mind? And that started the conversation. And that's how we got to know each other, right? So I feel like now, Kimberly, there's so many online publications that need content really, really badly, because no longer are we relegated to just a finite amount of shelf space, if you will, like a newspaper or magazines. Everybody has a website and they all need content. And if you go where a scene already exists and make yourself valuable by simply asking, may I contribute in some capacity, that works out really well. Now, people might say, well, that has nothing to do with social media, but really it does, because people online are constantly talking about their problems or their issues or what they're seeking out to do. And you can essentially find out by way of their shares what it is that they're lamenting or what they want, and just contribute to that conversation. Not go in for the hard sell, like, hey, I heard you want this. It's more so just trying to contribute and be helpful, and understanding that if you have that conversation happening in public, it might not be that individual to whom you might sell something or have them become your client, but all of these other people on the periphery are also paying attention to that same conversation happening. So it's a way to scale what it is by simply participating in online conversations.
So well said. I mean, that is it. And I think that, oftentimes the audiences that we speak in front of and the clients, everybody wants a shortcut, right? Everybody wants that magic bullet that's going to get them from A to Z without going through B through X or Y, right?
Yep. Yes. Yep.
And
Yep.
it's a process, and I mean, that's why that's one of the reasons that we have what I call the secret sauce, the secret to marketing success, and this is generally, is the consistent, persistent, massive amounts of action over a prolonged period of time. There's nothing rocket science about it. You just find your target. You got to know who it is that you're looking for, engage and implement these different marketing tactics. And in this professional services world, it's relationship building, reputation enhancing, contact management. And so the relationship building, contact management, social media and social media marketing hit that square in the face. And then the reputation management, of course, we all are our own PR agents nowadays, right?
Yes. Yes. You're absolutely
I
right.
mean, so it's just a matter of knowing, being educated, which there's nothing that you can't learn on Mr. Google, and and taking up the I guess just taking up the mantle and educating yourself and actually implementing. And that's what we find that folks really struggle with, as the implementing. They don't know what to write about. They don't know how often, and all those, all the down in the weeds situations. But they don't realize that this is like, as long as you have a business. In fact, I just had this conversation on Wednesday with a client. Well, how long do we have to do this? I said, how long do you intend to have your business?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like,
Hmm.
okay. So I'm just curious, in our in a few minutes that we have remaining, what do you see when you're out and about and speaking and teaching and training? What do you see most of your audiences and your clients struggling with respect to social media?
It's exactly what you had said. And I love where you depicted this in your book so well when you came up with that strategic plan as far as business development
Mhm.
goes. And, as one example, you say, go to, let's say a couple networking events. And let's say people do that. And they say, I went to 2 networking events and it didn't work. Well, then go to
Yeah.
4. Well, 4 didn't work. Well, then go to 8. Well, maybe you're just not very good at networking, so maybe try a different approach, right? Maybe try writing or something along those lines. But I think the really, really operative part of it, Kimberly, is consistency, because you can introduce a new concept to people. It's a novelty, it's exciting, but then let's face it, business is a lot of drudgery. Like you just got to do the same thing over and over once you find it works. And there's this old adage in sales from a guy who's done 3,000 in-person sales meetings between '08 and 15 in financial services. The old adage in sales is things work so well that you stop doing them because they're no longer exciting to you. But that's just what we have to do. If you find something that works, keep doing it and don't just have it go by the wayside.
It is. I mean, I agree with you that that's our greatest challenge. So when we're implementing digital marketing plans, we say to our clients, which they love us for, they're skeptical at first, is, one of the big hiccups is the content generation. I don't have time. I'm billing. We're taking care of my clients. And I'm like, I'm going to give you the biggest prize and gift that you can think of. I don't want our clients writing anything
Mm,
because I don't think it's a good use of their time. Not that there's not going to be content developed, but we have writers that are especially trained, in whatever the substance area is. And so as long in our view, Google doesn't care who writes it as long as it's factually accurate and original. And we tell our clients, as long as we have to upload timely, topical, and relevant content that's going to reach and appeal to your target audience, that's all that matters.
mm. Well
You
said.
know,
Well said.
it doesn't have to be, in our world of legal services, it doesn't need to be a brief, that we're writing. And this is a
Mhm.
problem because that's what they're taught to do. And so I'm like, better use of our clients' time in our view is to have one of our writers interview our clients and talk with them about something that's new, some trend, some emerging, some threat or whatever, to get the inside based on their case studies and in the case of their client matters. And then the writer can write about it. If the client wants to review it, for factual accuracy, fine, but don't get bogged down in the weeds of grammar smithing or wordsmithing something. It's got to be timely. Let it go. Huh.
Yes, yes, and err on the side of simplicity, right? Because we're not writing to impress your peers. We're usually, most
Right.
oftentimes, writing to gather more business, right? And so write for those whom you're trying to serve.
So looking into your crystal ball, as you have this wide platform that you're on. What do you see? What do you the substance that you introduce and present to your audiences? What do they find most surprising, kind of about where we are with the social media world, LinkedIn for business development?
I think it's a statistic that I share that had actually come from the Mayo Clinic 20 years ago. Doctors were very early adopters of what they called the bulletin board systems back then, which were the early, advent of the internet. And what they discovered is those that were these physicians that were participating in these online communities with each other to mind share, if you will, about 90% of people in those online communities were considered spectators. They didn't participate at all. All they did was read. And then 9% engaged in some capacity. They liked or they shared things or they commented on what it is that people had done. And then the 1% were those who were producing content. And you advance now 20 years in the future, and what's now become known as the 1% rule of the internet, that still applies. So 99% of people statistically are influenced by 1%. And now that 1% is so fragmented because it's much easier to get more famous to your target audience. And in brief, what I mean by this is if you were to ask a high school senior class, hey, who's your favorite YouTuber? Let's say there's 17 high schoolers and you ask them, who's your favorite YouTuber? You're probably going to get 17 different answers and you won't know a single one of those favorite people because they're not for you.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is if you declare, I serve this niche and I solve this problem for my legal clients, that is the best way possible to become a thought leader in that space is simply by producing content that niches down. I'm using that as a verb, so excuse me, but niching down with the idea that you can then serve those people and those people specifically. So get famous, if you will, to that group.
Wonderful, wonderful. In our last two questions, one is looking into your crystal ball. This is what you do every day in social media marketing, business development, and your rotma. What do you see on the horizon for social media marketing, particularly LinkedIn? What does SM 3.0 look like?
I think LinkedIn specifically is really chasing Facebook right now from a technological standpoint because Facebook has been the leader when it comes to those creepy ads, right? Like, why am I seeing these shoes in the color that I like and the size that I wear? And LinkedIn with the 26 billion dollar acquisition by Microsoft, they're really trying to monetize this platform because it is in fact people at work giving their truth, right? This is me, this is what I do. And I feel like LinkedIn is going to become much more of a targeted source where people go on to LinkedIn and they're going to see exactly what they want at the exact right time. So that's what I see in the near future is LinkedIn just becoming much better at understanding who people are at work.
Wow, that's fascinating. So I have one question that I ask all of our guests, and because I find it personally interesting, but I think we all are of a certain age that um, I'll just ask if you could give your younger self one piece of professional advice, what would it be?
Buy more real estate. That was something I've done systematically for years, and the deals that I didn't buy are the ones that I regret the most. So I would try to get more real estate because that bolsters an ability to try other stuff and know that there's a safety net.
Gotcha. Wow,
Yeah,
phenomenal. Well, thank you so much, Spence. How can our listeners get connected with you?
probably the best way is on my website, which is just my name, spencerxsmith.com, or I'm also on all the social media platforms under that same name.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fascinating conversation. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Secret Sauce Marketing Tastings. Certainly, you can hit us up at www.klamarketing.com to learn more. And we look forward to talking with you again soon. Take care, Spence.